I guess some of you may have noticed that within the effective altruism community, there's a reasonable amount of attention given towards artificial intelligence, and I want to talk about a bit about that and what I think it means for what we should be doing, in some cases, conclusions that I think aren't warranted from that. So some ideas that are feeding into this. First is the idea that actually, from a moral perspective, most of what matters about our actions is their impact on the very long term and how that plays out. Then there's some empirical assumptions. There's the idea that artificial intelligence might be the most radically transformative technology that has ever been developed, for better or worse. And there's the idea that because it's for better or worse, that influencing the way in which it's developed and whether that is beneficial or not could be a major way to impact the long-run future. Finally, an empirical claim that timelines on the scale of decades for the development of radically transformative artificial intelligence are at least plausible. This isn't a fully general argument we could have made back in the 18th century. Okay, you may or may not believe all of these things. For this talk, I want to take them as assumptions going in, and I want to explore, if you do believe these, what does it mean for what we should be doing? I think that one cartoon view says, well, if you think this, we should all stop whatever else we were doing and just go and work directly on that problem and try and make sure that we get good outcomes by learning how to code AI that's going to be good for people. I don't agree with that cartoon. One of the things I want to do with this talk is to get into an explanation of why that is. So if we're thinking about artificial intelligence, one of the first uncertainties is actually on what kind of timescale should we be expecting this? What can we say about timelines? And the first thing that we notice if we look at that is that actually predicting technology is very hard. Particularly predicting qualitatively new technologies. Sometimes we have things like Moore's law and we can do curve fitting, but if we have something which is fundamentally different from what's gone before, it is extremely difficult to be confident in dates for that. I think, therefore, that uncertainty and significant uncertainty about timelines is appropriate. And this is borne out if you ask experts. This graph is from a survey of a lot of machine learning researchers and asking them for the dates by which they think that almost all kind of bits of human cognition and work may be automated, and there's just a lot of uncertainty. There's a lot of uncertainty between researchers and some disagreements there, but if I were going to summarise it, I'd say that the consensus view is that we don't know. It is plausible that it could happen early, and it's plausible that it could happen, and early meaning within even the next 10 years, but it's plausible that quite plausible that it could be more than 100. So I want to investigate that because I think that we'll want to do different things if we conditional on these different timelines. In order to have a conversation about that and to talk about it, I want to look at some discrete scenarios which represent a few particular points within this continuous space. The reason I'm looking at discrete things rather than just talking about a full continuous distribution is that it's easier to think about and hold discretely in the mind. It's also much easier to communicate and have a conversation about what's going on here, and people can push back and disagree if they think that's wrong. So the first of my scenarios is where things are actually happening imminently on the timescale of just a handful of years. If we conditional on that, we say let's assume this is the case, then it's more likely that we can make good guesses about who will be involved in developing radically transformative AI. Maybe we can go and talk to them and help them work out how to do it well. It's also the case that if your plan is, okay, I'm going to do a master's in computer science, and then I'm going to do a PhD in machine learning, and then I'm going to go and get a job in government and like try and be their AI policy person, and in 12 years I should be well positioned, and radically transformative AI is coming in 5 years, that's not a good plan. So on this scenario, it's beneficial to go for things which are significantly shorter and more direct. If we look at a slightly longer scenario, what I've called this generation, and I've chosen these scenarios roughly the split of time because I think that the actions implied are different. On this kind of time scale, I think that plans like the one I just mentioned, where you're kind of building a career or trying to set people up to be in the right position to help things, works pretty well. I also think it's the right kind of timescale, characteristic timescale for building academic fields. You can hash out an argument, you can get the conclusions accepted, you can get them to filter through to decision makers over this kind of timescale. If we look longer again, the scale of about 40 years, people retire. It's very hard to predict, but I think where any of us in this room will be at a scale of 40 years' time. It's also paradigms shift within academia. You could persuade people of a thing and then find that actually there's been kind of 2 big shifts in thinking later down the line. So we shouldn't make too many assumptions about things that we're doing now having implications for what we'll be doing further down the line in this time frame. Therefore, it's better to build institutions which push towards getting things right, rather than just going, okay, we need to do this as quickly as possible. And that means we want to be persuading people really of the things which are solidly correct. We want to be putting people in positions to, if they're making mistakes, do the self-correction later. If we look out even further, something at the time scale of a century, then it's very hard to predict causal pathways between now and then. There's just a lot of things that could happen, and so very precise plans don't look so good. I think instead we really want to focus on building broad institutions. I think actually the effective altruism community could be one of those institutions. It's about empowering people in the future, making them our epistemic superiors, and so that they are positioned to work out what's going on, what to do, and act on that. It's also a timescale over which I said artificial intelligence might be radically transformative. Maybe there are other things which will be quite transformative to our society happening, and I think that the longer the timelines we're looking at, the more important it is to pay attention to other transformative technologies. Okay, I've outlined these. I've argued that we want to take different actions for conditional on these different timelines, but I also said we don't actually know which of these is correct. How are we meant to ramify that and pull together and come up with a conclusion of what to actually do? Here are some strategies we could take. First is just try not to take views. Say, well, it's correct to be pretty uncertain, so we'll take actions which look like they're going to be good for all of these different timelines. I think that is a bad idea because it might be that we miss the best actions that are available, because the best actions perhaps you only spot if you have a particular thing in mind and you think, how can I achieve that? So, we could look at which of these things do we think is the most likely and act on the basis of that. The problem with that is that it ignores the fact that we might be able to have more influence over some of these scenarios than others. If we think we have a lot of influence over the 15-year timeline, but that the 100-year timeline is more likely, we just have no idea what to do about it in that case, we may well be better taking action on this, aiming at the 15-year timeline, this generation, rather than the distant case. But there's a problem. That suggests that we should be aiming for whichever has the highest likelihood multiplied by leverage, where that's just kind of the most influence we can have. If everybody were really good at following that strategy, I think it would be okay, but I don't really endorse it as a way of thinking about this, because leverage varies. Leverage will vary between individuals, so it isn't the case we can just have a conversation of which of these is the best to do, and now we're all going to agree and go and focus on that. Partly because there's diminishing returns as you put more and more effort into one particular strategy, and that would mean it could be correct to shift into other strategies. Partly just because the opportunities that come along vary. They can be different between people. They can sometimes be different for individuals as well. So what I think we should normally do is think about what portfolio of actions we want to be taking as a whole community, and using that to try and guide what we're actually doing. So the way I think about that is that we should collectively discuss a lot of these uncertainties which feed into the decisions, the relative probabilities, the amount of leverage we have in the different cases, the diminishing returns on more work going in. We should use that to have a discussion about what does the ideal portfolio of work over these different strategies look like. Then we can individually consider how we think that people are acting and how that deviates from the ideal portfolio. And we can also think about what our personal comparative advantage is, and whether that means that we should be doing something in particular. So I expect that most of you are familiar with the idea of comparative advantage, but here's quickly how I like to think of it. If you have Harry, Hermione and Ron, and you have 3 tasks that you want to get done, and each task needs one person acting on it. Hermione is the best at everything, but you can't send Hermione to do all of the things. So you want to line people up so that you're making relatively good use of the skills that everybody has, given the opportunity costs and given the other things that they might be doing. And I think that this is a heuristic that we can use at different levels and can be a useful general thinking tool. So we can think about it as individuals. If you notice that you get confused when you think about AI, but you're quite good at thinking about how to design good institutions, then that probably means that you're better placed to be helping on the longer timescales than the shorter ones. We can think about it at the scale of groups and organisations. There are different actions which different groups are better placed to be taking, and particularly as they build specialisation, as they start doing things, now they build up expertise, and that helps feed into what they should be doing in the future. We can also think about this across time. People in the past did some things, we're going to do some things, people in the future will do some things. Now we can't change what the people in the past did, but we can perhaps, people in the future can react to what we do, and so we can say, what is our comparative advantage by being in the present, in 2017, compared to people in 2027, 2037. And there are 2 things, broad conclusions that I draw out of trying to apply that reasoning to this case of the AI scenarios. One is that I think it provides a bit of reason to focus on the imminent and this generation scenarios, because if AI is coming, if transformative AI is coming in the next 15 years, people in 2037 can't do anything about it. And we have this advantage of being actually in a position where we're the people who can take actions to try and help for those scenarios. If you look at conditioning on the longer term scenarios, you can then say what is particularly useful to do early. And I think that that's often the building the right community and building the right institutions rather than trying to tackle the problems directly, where you actually have an advantage when you're nearer to the time because you're able to better see exactly the nature of the problems. So that fed into some of the things I was saying earlier about what I thought the best strategies were conditional on some of the different timelines. So here's a couple of broad thoughts on this portfolio approach. I think that most projects that people are undertaking should have a main scenario in mind, because this allows them to enter into that mode of thinking where they can be quite goal-directed and they can work out what is it that we actually want to achieve here. And to the extent that there may be better things that you think of when you go into that mode, this is why I didn't want everybody just saying, well, we won't take views. I think it's often good to take views, maybe even try out a couple of different views and work out what seems particularly good for those cases. I think it's often the case that most individuals should have a main scenario in mind as well, because the comparative advantage varies. I think this won't always be the case, but often. That said, do be careful about things which might be bad for other scenarios. So, if radically transformative AI were definitely coming in 5 years' time, it might be that the right thing to do would be to go around and say, everybody panic! I actually don't think that would be a good idea. But you might at least think, look, this is the way to persuade people that this is coming very soon. We should do that, and then we'll actually get more attention onto this problem. Even if that were correct, conditional on the imminent timeline scenario, I think it is a terrible idea, because if we're not in the imminent timeline scenario, but instead radically transformative AI is coming in 25 years, then when that comes along, and people try to generate momentum around it, everyone will say, you know, we've heard that before, this turns out to be nonsense. So it's a case where the side effect of the action was not just neutral, but actively bad for one of the other scenarios. And I think that if we're splitting up and doing different bits of work, we want to be cooperative and do things which are helpful, or at least not bad for the things that other people are doing. And I think that the particular example I used there actually generalizes. Something which is helpful across lots of different cases is having good mechanisms for arriving at the truth and coming to believe true things about the world. Here's a cartoon of how I think about that. The truth is a jigsaw puzzle, and we all have little pieces of it, and we're walking around with those, and we want to assemble this into a larger thing which is going to tell us how to act. And so we want to build institutions which are good at doing this, which don't, if people insert pieces which are incorrect, don't just run with those and are better at excluding those. I think one thing we can do is think about what kinds of institutions have that effect. But we can also think about this at a local level. If people are saying things, they have ideas, and they communicate these to others, one thing that happens is we end up communicating things that have been communicated to us. But that doesn't necessarily track which ideas are most truthful. It might be that instead it tracks who is the most charismatic and who is good at persuading people of things. And this is something that we want to be careful about. We'd like to have things which don't push us towards this dynamic, and instead which do help us keep track and correct this and move back towards the truth wherever possible. I'm just gesturing at the type of things that one can do within this space, but I think that, so one norm that we can have, which is quite local and we can all invest in, is communicating the reasons for beliefs. Don't just say green puzzle piece, say My friend Anna told me good puzzle piece, and I think she's quite smart, and I trust her reasoning, and that's why I believe it. If that's why I believe it. Or I came up with this idea myself, and I haven't fully tested it. Or somebody told me this is the argument that they gave, it seems to check out to me. But communicate as much as possible the different steps that actually led you to beliefs, and then your audience gets a better picture of the extent to which they should trust not just the idea, but the whole process leading up to that. And I think that that is something which can help us be self-correcting. Okay, coming back, what should individuals within the effective altruism community do about artificial intelligence? I think I have three main things here. First of all, it's good if they take a bit of time to consider those assumptions. Maybe some of you already have. But I don't want to argue people should just, because I find these plausible, people should blindly believe me. Actually go away and think about them. And if you end up disagreeing, great. Talk to people about why you disagree. Try and work out. There'll be some of the aspects of thinking that I've presented here which may be useful for you for working out what you think you should do, even if you disagree with me about some of these claims. But you can also perhaps persuade other people of that perspective. And maybe I'm wrong about some of these things. If there's one of these that you've just never spent a bit of time thinking about, I do recommend it. I think that they're all quite important questions that feed into the question of how we should be helping the world. So I think they are worth that attention. Secondly, I think people should consider their personal comparative advantage. I think it is valuable to have people who are very good technically, who are the kind of people who could be top PhDs in mathematics or computer science, going and spending attention to the problem of the technical problems of how do we build robustly beneficial AI. But there are just, like, for most people, that is not going to be a path which is good for them. And so I don't think we should... I think that they are better thinking about what other methods could I have to help support work on this. That might be other types of actions aimed at short timelines. It might be actions aimed at longer timelines. I think that there's a broader basin of things that we should be doing conditional on the longer timelines. And so there's a broader set of skills which look particularly useful there. And then finally, help promote good community epistemics, because I think that this is the type of thing which is likely to help us go well as a whole community, and hopefully build a long and flourishing future.
Thank you so much, Owen. I just saw that Slido is actually working, and I'm very excited about that. So a lot of you have been asking questions, and a lot of other people voted some questions up. So the first question today is, what might be the AI-driven transformation we are talking about?
Gosh, right, that's a big question. I'll say some words. I'll also point people to some online content about this, because I think it is just a long topic. I like Paul Cristiano's essays, 3 Impacts of Machine Intelligence. I recommend people Google that. It's not a long essay, but it does talk about a number of things. Roughly, I think that growth rates and the developments of new technologies might massively accelerate And it's also the case that right now, kind of all large processes in the world involve human decision making, and AI is not just an automative technology, it's a fully general automative technology, and that means that we're going to be able to remove humans from more and more loops, and I think that that's something that we want to be careful about.
Perfect. So, just a short request, does everybody know about Slido, or is somebody in here in the room that did not attend the opening speech? Okay. Yeah, just a very quick intro. We have this Slido app here. You can use the app, you can use it on your browser, on your phone. Just use this hashtag, it's 1719, and choose the room you're in, and then you can ask a question. You can do it anonymously or with your name, doesn't matter. And then you can upvote the questions. We're going to ask the most upvoted questions, so that's how it works. Yeah, the next question is from Medea. How can we estimate the likelihood and leverage of the scenarios?
Right. I think that there's a combination of things that we can do here. We can try and take inside view perspectives where we look at our understanding of the technology. We look at what rates do technologies tend to change, how often do we find very sudden, large breakthroughs. The website AI Impacts has quite a lot of good analysis of this type. Another thing that we can do is we can say, let's try and take the outside view, let's look at what other people think, let's go and look at what the experts think, which is why I included that graph. You can go and read the paper and try and find the perspectives of what a lot of people who are working on AI think. I think ideal might be some combination of these different approaches. That surveys people who are working on AI, but just because they're working on AI, they don't actually spend necessarily a lot of time thinking about this question. It might be better to find people who have spent quite a lot of time thinking about this question and go and talk to them.
Perfect. Okay, maybe one last question. Please demarcate transformative AI from general technology. Is there any meaningful difference?
Yeah, by the way, I love these questions. Basically, all of these questions could be a large research field by itself, so I apologize for the inadequacy of my answers. I think that, in some sense, AI may just be another technology. But by transformative AI, I mean something which is probably at least as big a deal as the Industrial Revolution was. In some sense, the Industrial Revolution was just more technologies, but it led to a qualitatively different world afterwards than beforehand. I think that two big features about AI, I've alluded to both of them already, are one, that it's something which can actually let us take humans out of more and more loops, and that means that it's more important to be careful about the direction it's going in advance, rather than just say, well, we'll develop it and then we'll work out what to do. The other is that because, like the Industrial Revolution sped up growth rates quite a lot, I think it could be that automating a lot of cognitive tasks also speeds up progress and future growth rates a lot. And that can mean that we have more thinking time now in advance of getting into a regime where things are going very quickly. And this is a reason why it's important to pay attention to in advance relative to most technologies.
Thank you so much. The time is over. I know there are a lot of more questions. Owen, I think you're going to stick around here. Maybe people can come just like up here and ask some more questions. Thank you so much, Owen. That's very interesting.